A silent, mysterious marksman has been determining the outcomes of large-scale battles completely on its own. Kingdoms have fallen due to a single arrow. When you have the skills to strike higher-ups and even the ones in charge at any time you please, it's only safe to say that you can inflict a lot of chaos very quickly. The nickname it has been given is the Arcane Deadeye, a name that these days is only whispered among even the most fearful enemies. Who is this individual though? No one knows for sure or where the Deadeye came from, and only a few got a glimpse of actually seeing this entity in action. It's rumored that it isn't even mortal. We know, however, by now that it has fused its meticulous skills in archery with forgotten schools of spellcraft, channeling raw arcane energy through his arrows. And each shot isn't just an arrow, it's more like a spell, a curse, a death sentence. From banishing foes to realms unknown to torturing them before they die. And the worst thing is, nobody expects the Arcane Deadeye. Being a ranger, it strikes from everywhere and anywhere, while being everywhere and anywhere. All that remains is the hush before the shot, and the certainty that when it lands, you cease to exist. Today's build makes use of the Arcane Archer subclass that was introduced with patch 8, but this is not going to be a pure mono class. No, we add a, for now, mystery dip to truly ascend the power of this build to levels that go beyond human comprehension, with the gods of war making extra sure that we will excel in battle. I would say that Arcane Archer is probably, all things considered, easily one of the strongest subclasses added, not because of its damage, even though it's also really good, but because it's an ultra utility carry that comes online very early on without really needing any gear, just a bow, making today's build an absolute S+ tier pick in any comp that can absolutely destroy honor mode. Doesn't even matter which 3 others you add to the comp. For all I care, you can add 3 headless chickens and it will still work out. But okay, let's move on step by step, right? Before this type of teasing culminates into problems in the premature ejaculation department. Like and subscribe to prevent that from happening even more right now. Leveling up is very easy as an Arcane Archer, multiclass or monoclass. Level 1 you pick archery as your fighting style, the obvious choice. Abilities you grab 60 intelligence and 60 dexterity. You are a mix of magical influences and physical damage. The CC or magical effects of your arcane shots use your intelligence for determining your spell save DC, while dexterity rolls for the actual damage of your bow. And dexterity also gives you initiative and AC, as you know. You pretty much are a multi-ability dependent class as an Arcane Archer, which is completely fine. Constitution at 14 for the HP and maintaining concentration spells a bit better, and the rest of your abilities are not so important here. Can be dumped or kept neutral like this. Race doesn't matter too much, but I would recommend the Githyanki here, pure strategically speaking, just for the free spells that you get in the form of Misty Step, providing you the option for total positional supremacy in combat once per long rest. Mage Hand is always useful for various strategic purposes, and Enhanced Leap helps out as well with positioning. And then Astral Knowledge is the icing on the cake, giving us proficiency in any skill whenever we want. Useful for, say, using it on Wisdom, which will help us out with survival and perception checks if we want to scout with our Arcane Archer here, or when playing solo to detect traps and find hidden loot and stuff like that. And an Arcane Archer is very well suited for that task due to your huge range from where you can potentially strike from. Alternatively, anything that comes with CC denial and utility like superior dark vision, like say a drow, is good too, and a half elf would have elf like always are good options as well. It's really whatever you fancy roleplaying. If it's not a custom character, then Lae'zel is the Githyanki and fighter innately, so I would say that she is the most fitting option here. Proceeding then, at level 2 you get Action Surge. Amazing ability, giving us a second action once per short rest, one of the best class specific abilities in the game, and a reason why many people multi-class into fighter with other classes. Probably needs no introduction at this point in time, but at level 5 it's 4 attacks when used, and at level 11 it's 6 attacks when used. Yes, it is amazing. Level 3 then. We get our arcane shots and you get access to all of them, but can only choose 3 right now at the same time. And from here on out, this is pretty much the most defining option in the leveling interface. So let's go ahead, pause leveling for a second and start talking about these arcane shots and which ones you always want to prio. I think the best way to illustrate this is through a tier list and a segment on its own. So let's go ahead. The tier list here will have 3 ranks. The highest rank, the god tier, basically absolute must-haves. The second tier, generally good. good. And the third tier, the lowest of the lowest, avoid. Let's go from the worst arcane shot to the best arcane shot. Starting with Beguiling Arrow, which gets placed in avoid. Definitely avoid this thing. The magical effect here is that you have the possibility to charm your target when it hits with this arrow. Charmed is not that impactful overall in a party setup. It just means that the charmed enemy won't attack you specifically. But as an archer type of playstyle where you're far away from melees anyways, you should already be the least likely to be hit anyways. And the thing with charmed is you can still get attacked with it through AoE damage and effects, through the collateral damage of things targeting your allies. So it doesn't even do the one thing it's supposed to be good at. Good. Avoid this garbage, please. Accompanying Beguiling Arrow in the avoid section is then going to be the Enfeebling Arrow. This one is a bit better than the Baguette Arrow, because the feeble condition that it applies can in fact actually benefit the rest of your party, but it's just too passive compared to all the other arcane shots that you can potentially get. If Feeble here is successfully applied, it will make any user with a strength scaling weapon deal half the damage, but it's also going to check every single turn to end this condition through an enemy's constitution saving throw. So it rolls for you losing it right away too, and yeah, that happens. It's overall just too lackluster to feel its impact, hence why it gets the avoid tier.
It's the biggest piece of dog.
With that then, we have covered the avoid tier. Now we move up to the generally good tier, and the lowest placement in this tier is going to be the Seeking Arrow arcane shot. I would say that Seeking Arrow here gets most of its power early on, since it's guaranteed to hit, and that's the reason you want to use it. It's like magic missiles in that sense, and early on everybody is on a missing campaign, as you know, so this definitely helps out in getting the damage in. And it can then also additionally apply Fairy Fire, which can get your entire party advantage on attacks to the target, which also helps out with your accuracy, and this is definitely another factor to use it early. But it also loses its power in the mid to late game, when your accuracy gets up to par through other means, and I would say that it's a mix of being a must-have early on, but avoid late game, hence placing it in the middle. Its Fairy Fire effect is ultimately also completely outclassed by another arrow that gets the absolute must-have classification, as in turn for the guaranteed damage plus potential Fairy Fire, this arrow type gets the lowest damage bonus of all these arcane shots that come with a damage bonus. Moving up one spot in the general good tier then is going to be Grasping Arrow. This one is just the definition of generally good. It's pretty much just the arrow version of Booming Blade. You shoot it off, you get some bonus poison damage while doing so, and if the target then moves on their turn, it deals another 2d6 slashing damage to the target. So really useful in fights with a lot of melees or enemies that are constantly on the move. Some examples for the latter include because you are forcing them to move with a spell like Command or Dominate Person, or because the environment is forcing them to do so. Think of stuff like them needing to move to be able to target you as you are otherwise out of their attack range, or because they are being harmed by an AoE effect on the battlefield like Cloud of Daggers, and the AI is giving a high prioritization to flee from that, so you know they're going to move. A good number of use cases, as you can see, and it's just a solid option that I would definitely consider. Now the highest spots in the generally good tier are going to be given to Piercing Arrow and Bursting Arrow, the two AoE arcane shots, and I would run both of these simultaneously when you get 4 or 5 shots, as they accompany each other very well. Bursting Arrow comes with a nice range and attacks everything in a circular radius, so if enemies are stationed in a circle like that, you can quickly do a lot of AoE damage, and it's of the force damage type, so outside of some very specific examples, its damage it will always apply, making it just a great spell. And the other one is going to be Piercing Arrow, which strikes in a straight path with a pretty decent radius, but comes with a shorter range, almost melee actually. So if enemies aren't stationed far away or in a circular pattern, then this one comes in very clutch when they are pretty much lined up. It's also not a targeted shot as you cast it in front of you, meaning you can hit invisible targets with it, or things that are immune to being targeted due to, say, having Sanctuary on, or targets that have CC'd you, preventing you from attacking them like the earlier mentioned Charm CC. But Piercing Arrow's biggest benefit is that it can apply the magical effects of your bow to anything it hits, and since it's an AoE spell, you can quickly get a bunch of status effects on a bunch of targets like this instantly. For example, if you get the Bow of the Banshee in early Act 1, you can now just frighten an entire group potentially with Piercing Arrow like that. Hence why it's a great shot. The reason these two are not in the highest tier, however, is because they can't really turn over a lost battle in your favor, which those placed in that category can, and the damage does fall off late game. So they are not the ultra carry types of shots, but still great AoE options, and definitely early to mid game can give you insane value. The two remaining arcane shots are then the absolute must-haves, which I would recommend to have in your kit at all times. And the first of two here is going to be the Pink Shot. Banishing Arrow. The potential to have a banish in your kit as soon as level 3 is incredibly overpowered. From this point onwards, you can just banish any big target or threat in any fight really, and you will do so quite consistently because it's tied to the enemy's charisma save. A lot of the powerful enemies in the game are either ugly or dumb, or you're just, not very charismatic, so you will get the banish off very consistently. And the momentum swing here is definitely insane. You can literally just banish the boss, clean up the rest or a vast majority of the remaining enemies, considering the banish lasts for 2 turns, and a big threat being gone means you're much more likely to not get any annoying CC on you or get damaged significantly, which then in turn requires you to use resources to heal up, for example, or just straight up die. It's just insane momentum value, and on honor mode you can just banish any big target and do the fights you're supposed to do with more levels now earlier on. And it's very simple, you again banish the main threat and accordingly you will just stomp the rest. And the funny thing here is that this shot scales very well with levels, because when you get more attacks you can just straight up banish the entire field if you really want. But Banishing Arrow here is also just one of those abilities that I found to actually have the capability to turn around a very lost looking like battle in your favor, or fights where you're just heavily outnumbered, like the fight outside the goblin camp, if you decide to do that earlier than you should. You can just banish the giants here and then just take on the normal goblin soldiers, get a lot of XP that way, smoothing your way up to the giant, which you will then accordingly very easily destroy. And late game, same exact story, but with now even more shots per turn, it never falls off, keeps scaling properly, and the utility is mind-boggling. And it's also complemented very well with the other shot in this tier, which is going to be Shadow Arrow. See, sometimes you just want to wrap things up quickly, do as much damage as you can, and don't need the oh shit button type of utility from Banish, which is where Shadow Arrow comes in clutch. Now the purple flavored Shadow Arrow here blinds targets in addition to it dealing psychic damage. And this is the only arcane arrow that deals psychic damage, and you already knows what that will mean. Late game it becomes a monster, as it will synergize very well with your Resonance Stone, which will be carried by your frontliner, and that psychic damage will be doubled as well. So great damage from the arrow, but that's one part of the coin. The other side is equally good, with you having a very reliable application of blind, as it rolls off wisdom from the enemy against your intelligence. And plenty of targets do not have any wisdom really. And blind does a bunch of things. It makes the blinded enemy less likely to hit you through disadvantage, makes you and your party on the other hand more likely to hit the blinded target through advantage, and versus ranged enemies like mages and archers, their attack range is severely reduced to only 3 meters. So it wastes a lot of their turns like that too. And again, it scales very well as well, because with more shots that you will get as you level, you get a lot more blinds per turn, and you can potentially blind up to 6 targets in a single turn with only action surge at level 11, and all of that bonus psychic damage in the late game will also get doubled through your Resonance Stone. So this one is just an absolutely magnificent shot, and I probably overall use this one the most out of any of these arcane shots. And with that then, this tier list is done, and I would just use this as the holy grail for how to pick up the arcane shots relative to your level. It gives you a nice way to pry out which ones to take at which level. And with the arcane shots covered, let's go back to the leveling interface then. Before we continue, however, now is a good time, and I have to mention it because I do get asked about it frequently. If you are into written guides or character sheets of my builds, then check out my Patreon. They are all there too in that format, and I also release them in advance there before I publish my videos. And that way you can also support the channel too if you want, or if you don't really care about the written guides but you still want to support the channel. So it is a win-win-win situation really. Yeah, check out my Patreon. Let's continue. At level 3 then, you only get 3 shots at the same time to use right now. So I would grab the shots that I placed in the highest tier, Banish and Shadow Arrow, and an AoE shot like Bursting Arrow. At this point in time you can also use Seeking Arrow over the Shadow Arrow if you don't have anything yet that increases your accuracy. These are now the moments where Seeking Arrow actually still has value, and you get a cantrip to use here as well, and Guidance is also on the menu, which is an actual S tier cantrip that you get for free. Helps out a lot with ability checks, so we grab that. At level 4 then, we do not grab Sharpshooter yet as our accuracy is just simply too low. We grab an ability improvement here and spike our dexterity with a nice +2 to help out with said accuracy. Now keep in mind that at every single level you can also swap out one arcane shot for another under the replace spell section. So you can definitely mix and mingle here to experiment all you want, but if you keep the tier list that I made in mind, you will always pretty much have the best results. Level 5 then is a huge power spike as well. You get your extra attack, 2 shots every turn, and potentially 4 with action surge is of course insane value at these levels. And level 6 then, we get another feat. Now at this point we will have relatively high dexterity, and we will also have several sources of improving our attack rolls, so it is time to pick up Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is the token feat for any archery based build, as it gives you a whopping plus 10 damage per shot. I probably do not need to introduce this stuff still at this point in time, but yeah, we definitely get it, and as we level, we're getting more and more shots as you saw, so its value cannot be underestimated. Level 7 then, you get another arcane shot, so you can use 4 of them now. Yay, party time! Now I would refer to the tier list to get the next one in line now. Keep in mind these are all ranked within the tiers as well. And at level 7 you get magic arrow as well, helps out with denying resistances, so basically just more damage, and you get curving shot. Curving shot is a very interesting ability. You can use it as a reroll for an arrow that you missed using a bonus action. So it provides a lot of value actually, because it can lead to scenarios where you still get value on even a low percentage hit roll, but it also technically extends your attack range, because you can hit unreachable enemies behind whatever you targeted and accordingly missed. And that in itself can lead to more kills or more CC application. Or for example, if it's one of those explosive mobs that when it dies will still AoE damage the missed target. So there are some cool intricacies related to this ability, and it's also just a funny ability for some reason. You miss something and then just another random bystander gets it and dies. Yeah, it's a meme. Level 8 then, we get our third feat, and you know what, we grab another 2 points in dexterity, making our bow shots now quite hard hitting while having even better accuracy at a whopping 20 dexterity. Level 9, we get the class General Fighter passive, Indomitable, which helps out with sustain really nicely. If we fail a saving throw, say due to any annoying spell from any enemy, we can roll again once per long rest and potentially succeed the second time, and thus completely ignore or dampen its effect for free. Level 10, we get our 5th arcane shot. So now you can really just finalize the roster, and per my tier list and prowess within every tier, it should thus be Banishing Arrow, Shadow Arrow, Bursting Arrow, Piercing Arrow, and Grasping Arrow. Having those 5 is in my opinion just the best final roster of your arcane shots, and you have everything you need, and I've avoided the lower tier arcane shots that way. It's the good stuff, and you know, let me know in the comments if you agree. Level 11 then, we get our third attack. It's another huge power spike, and this one is just one of the reasons why Fighter is just a really good class in general, and Arcane Archer being a subclass within it is a blessing in itself. And then the final level, level 12. Now here you can definitely just stay a mono class, just go 12 levels of pure Arcane Archer. It's a great choice because you get another feat, and I would personally just grab Martial Adept here in case you decide to stick to a pure Arcane Archer to enhance the build's idea with getting more shots with some kind of special effect in addition to arcane shots. In this case, I would personally take Pushing Attack for the one-hit insta-kill potential, since we don't have anything yet that just pushes enemies backwards into their potential death and essentially punish them for standing at very risky spots. So adding this shot to the roster definitely adds something. And for the other Martial Adept choice, you can grab something like Trip Attack, giving prone inside of your kit as well, which is yet another really good CC that does a bunch of things beneficial for the entire party and also helps out with obstructing movement from the enemy. However, I personally like dipping one level here into War Domain Cleric. Now I definitely think you want 11 levels of Arcane Archer at all times. There's no real reason to start multi-classing before that, because level 11 gives you a third attack, and that's just overpowered. And that means 6 attacks with action surge every short rest, so yeah, it is good to ignore. But at level 12, the War Cleric dip here adds a lot of value too. First of all, you get the War Domain Seal of Faith and Divine Favor that you can actually use your concentration for, because so far we haven't really had a spell to concentrate on. So it saturates a certain element we didn't saturate yet. You get a few utility cantrips too, and I would definitely pick these 3, and then you can additionally prepare a bunch of utility spells like Blast for more accuracy or the heals, but the option to prepare Sanctuary here is absolutely amazing too, because as you might know, Sanctuary just makes you completely untargetable until you attack again, so it's insane for sustained purposes when your Arcane Archer is treading dangerous waters, and it adds a lot of value to the build. And you have access to all these spells by the way, so you can accordingly switch it up too, but I would definitely avoid the damage of these spells, because they use Wisdom to scale their damage, and we are an intelligence-based spellcaster, technically. The biggest selling point of dipping War Cleric, however, are the War Priest charges though, which you can consume with your bonus action to make an additional attack. So that's now 4 attacks in a turn till you run out of these charges. Yeah, that is a lot of damage, or CC, or both. So ultimately leveling is covered, and your fighting strategy will now conclude to you doing 4 attacks on a baseline per turn with your War Priest charges, and these are hard hitting attacks with CC, so you can match the entire field if you want, or you know, Shadow Arrow blind and destroy everything with the Resonance Stone, doubling all of your Shadow Arrow's psychic damage, or do a bunch of AoE damage with your Bursting Arrow and Piercing Arrow shots. And with Action Surge you have 6 attacks as a baseline, or 7 attacks when you use one of your War Priest charges, and that's not even starting to use things like haste, which on honor mode will give you another attack. So that's number 8, or say just a spell to cast that we can get some utility from. So the Arcane Deadeye here is now finalized. You are seeing its insane power to fully control the battlefield. One thing we haven't talked about yet though is its gear. Now gear is definitely not so important for this build. As I said, it's not gear dependent at all and you get online very early on. But there's one slot that you definitely want to think about, and that is your bow slot. Because yeah, as an archer you need a good bow. So let's first start off with Act 1 and Act 2 and then conclude with the best in slots come Act 3. Now in Act 1 I would rush to Arcane's Rest, do the quest and get the Jolt Shooter. This is a really nice starting bow for you, giving you the potential to build up lightning charges which you can use to get extra damage in, and the lightning can also be doubled on wet targets or do cool stuff with it like making electrified surfaces, which gives you some nice extra damage through applying electrocution on the target. And these lightning charges here also enhance your accuracy to actually hit, so it helps out definitely. I would also at some point in Act 1 swap it out for the bow of the Banshee for applying Frightened and having great AoE CC through Piercing Arrow as earlier mentioned. So through this bow you can apply Frightened on a group quickly, and Frightened is just a really good CC, and you get an accuracy bonus here too if you then subsequently attack a frightened target. But either the Jolt Shooter or the bow of the Banshee will suffice really nicely for all of Act 1 and 2, so definitely grab one of those or both and just see which one you like more. In Act 3 then we swap out our bow for the Gunter Mail, a nice legendary +3 bow with some cool magical effects helping you out with accuracy but also gives you haste, so you can just cast it now on yourself for an extra attack. Who needs a mage, right? And you get the Bolt of Celestial Light for a nice extra unique powerful shot that frightens as well and lets you subsequently also deal extra damage. Now with these 3 bows you will definitely have a great time. They have a lot of utility and damage as you saw. Alternatively you can also still go the route of the Titan String bow plus the Club of Hill Giant Strength in Act 1 and 2, and then use the Gloves of Strength or use elixirs to get your strength to 27 in Act 3. The Titan String is a very popular option too for archer builds because its damage gets really high through using said elixirs or the gloves since it scales off strength. But it comes at the expense in this case of some of the utility that the other bows have. You'll have to make strength a part of the build too, and also burst is not the main concern of this build, so I personally like to stick to the first option that I went over and revolve around the dexterity based bows that I just mentioned. For gear in Act 1 and 2 then you just want to grab the following things. Major aspects here are stuff like the Gloves of Archery for a nice bonus, the Adamantine Splint Armor since we are a fighter and can actually wear it, helps out insanely well with sustain, Boots of Genial Striding for the CC denial, and then in Act 2 you can get the Helm of Arcane Acuity, which will make it very easy to apply the CC of all your shots. In Act 3 then, we finish off with either the Helmet of Arcane Acuity or the Mask of Soul Perception, which helps out really nicely with attack rolls, initiative, and perception checks. In my opinion, at this point in time, you will hit your CC quite consistently even without the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, so I personally went with the Mask of Soul Perception. Then for our cloak, we keep the Cloak of Elemental Absorption from Act 2 and onwards, just a nice sustained cloak with a cool bonus effect adding the elemental damage to our next shot for some extra damage. Then the Helldusk Armor for our chest piece, just a huge source of sustain here for our archer. Legacy of the Masters for our gloves then, really good for damage and accuracy. Boots of Genial Striding still all the way from Act 1 for our boots, and then we also keep using the Amulet of the Harpers from Act 2. Having the shield spell on your fighter-based Arcane Archer is some beautiful utility. Really like this amulet here, has been useful in many fights for me and helps out really well with your sustain. And the icing on the cake is that the amulet also gives you advantage with wisdom saving throws, so pretty nice against spells targeting your wisdom. For rings then, we continue to use the Killer Sweetheart from Act 2, a guaranteed crit is huge, and then for the other ring slot we either use the Caustic Band if it's still open for you personally, or the Ring of Mental Inhibition from Act 2 as well. The latter ring is really nice since we will be continuously checking our enemies versus various of our CC, and they will fail a lot of their saves against our CC, and then accordingly they will get punished with the extra CC from this ring in the form of fatigue, which will also damage them over time when said fatigue runs out in the form of psychic damage, which then in turn synergizes yet again with our Resonance Stone. So a really nice ring option. Then finally for our melee slots, we just want to use stat stakes here. So we buy the Ambusher weapon as soon as we get to Act 3, gives us nice extra damage as well as initiative, and then in the offhand we put Knife of the Undermountain King, which will now be available for the party associated with this build that will be covered in the next video. The Knife of the Undermountain King will be a really nice stat stick helping out with crits and rerolling 1s and 2s for your damage, meaning your damage output gets better as well. And with that, we have discussed everything. There's just one step left, and that's for you to now go ahead on the battlefield and annihilate everything with the Arcane Deadeye. Check out Patreon, subscribe, like, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section.